Also excited about this panel. We're here to talk about food, things we put in our bodies. Each of you has a very diverse and different background and approach in business. So I think maybe the best place to start, so people have context, is what do each of you do? How do you see the food industry? And then we can sort of look at some more abstractions from there. We'll start with you, Romina.
Of course, yeah. So thank you so much for having me here today, co-founder and CEO of Foodware. And I think the best way to explain what we do is really to talk about food. So everything comes in packaging, right? Unless you're eating fruits or vegetables, and a lot of it comes in single-use packaging. You can think of all of how problematic that is. We're having 500 million tons of single-use packaging that we're going through every single year alone in the US, and we don't know what to do with it. So really what Foodware does is we tackle that at its core with more circularity. So we enable all of that with technology, tracking and tracing technology, as well as reusable items that can be used many times. And this helps organizations save money and also save the planet.
And organizations being businesses, not necessarily retailers.
Correct. That would be corporates and universities.
Got it.
Hi there, my name is Ben Mand. I'm the CEO of Guayaki Yerba Mate, which you may have seen here as well. So many people probably don't know what yerba mate is. It's actually from the holly family, so like a tea. It's from the holly family. The leaf is caffeinated, so we harvest it, we dry it, we mill it, and you can drink it loose. So in South America, especially Argentina, Uruguay, Paraguay, even parts of Brazil, they'll drink it in a gourd with a bombilla, and that's how they consume yerba mate. We do that, we sell that loose in the US as well, but we also sell it in ready-to-drink beverages like I have right here. And so people use it. What's nice about it, it's ounce per ounce, it's similar caffeine as coffee, but it also has the polyphenols and vitamins and minerals that you find in like a green tea. And then it has a little theobromine, which is what you find in chocolate. So it gives you a little bit of that euphoric kind of high that you get with chocolate. So that's a little bit about us, or what we do. Our business model is built on this principle of regenerative business. So the idea of not only regenerative organic at the source, but everybody we work with along the supply chain, starting with farmers all the way through. The idea is how you work in a fair way to make sure that everybody is left in a better position than had you not worked with them. So very purpose-driven, regenerative organic, fair for life, certified B Corp kind of organization.
Cool. Rachel?
Hi, and then there's me. Hi. So I am the founder of Burlington Bio, but I also wear another hat, and I'm a mechanical engineering professor at the University of Vermont. And I say that because that very much matters about the vision and the values of Burlington Bio. So we are a biotech and a material science and engineering company. And we work to take agricultural waste, transform that into food ingredients. And one of the fancier things that we do is we create materials that go into cultivated meat production. So there, the idea is we will offset some of the stuff that's happening to our climate in industrial animal agriculture, not only trying to offset some of those greenhouse gas emissions, water usage, land usage, but also just trying to provide another food source for the billions of people going hungry around the world.
Cool. So maybe we start with I think there's universal acknowledgement that there are problems with our food system. There's problems with the way we create it, distribute it, and consume it. Maybe each of you could just tell me what you think our biggest challenge is, and then a little bit about how your business is trying to address it.
I think to tackle a few of those challenges, so we have food waste, we have single-use packaging that incorporates with food. You also think about creating more equity around those systems. So for instance, food waste, we are working very closely with a lot of companies that are tackling food waste in food services specifically. So they're making sure that we are tracking and measuring how much waste is actually created from all of the scraps. And that then ends up feeding into the beginning of it, how do we actually avoid creating more food that is not necessary. So we're making sure that we're working very closely with a lot of these organizations. And you also think about how to create more equitable food systems, right? So how do you support more of the local farmers to be able to access larger scale, to be able to provide more healthy meals? And then you also think about all of the end consumers, right? How do you create more delicious, nutritious meals for those that cannot afford it, right? So we're working very closely with communities, with organizations, nonprofits, to make sure to make those connections.
So what are say you're working with a client and you're offering you consult with them and help them rebuild their food system. What does that look like? Is there a client you could tell us about?
Of course. So we're working with larger Fortune 500 companies. So you can think of Google, for instance, where they have really large cafeterias where they're serving meals to employees every single day.
They have a really good cafeteria.
They do, and it's free food.
My sister
as well.
works at Google, and she's not invited me to the cafeteria yet.
Oh, it's a shame.
know.
It's really good food. But essentially they're going through, single-use containers every single day or cups. That really adds up quickly, ends up being, the big problem for the plastic problem that we have nowadays. 9% only has been recycled. So we basically are taking all of that out, and then we're providing them with reusable containers or cups, making sure that those can be sanitized, and then they're used again. And then we provide the software so they can actually prove, what metrics they're achieving, how many CO2 emissions they have saved, how much water they're saved, and so on. So that's pretty much how it works.
Excellent. Ben?
So I think, from my standpoint, I mean, there are a lot of problems and a lot of challenges, certainly. I think it starts with just how we think about farming and agriculture in general, and thinking about just something as simple or complicated as the Farm Bill and what you incentivize, right? We, and in many countries, but we especially really focus on a few core things and subsidize those. And so when you think about making food products, you often then rely on those things that are very cheap. And so you're not then putting dollars behind building diversity in types of ingredients, which is really important from a health and wellness standpoint, right? You are what you eat. And when you think about your microbiome and building that, your gut bacteria, to do that, part of it is having a very diverse diet, such that you're feeding all the different types and you have good diversity of microbiome, which then has positive health benefits. So, investing, making sure more dollars are going into organic and then regenerative organic, into new technologies, leveraging AI and drones and things like that from a farming practices standpoint. So, I think it starts there, and I think, from there, it's just how do you then work with different partners along the supply chain? I mean, retailers, as an example, the big multinational corporations have huge power, right? And they bring heaps of cash to the table. And often what happens is retailers use these big brands as their volume generators, and then they use the small brands where they make margin. And so the distributors that are getting the products there, the retailers that are putting stuff, use these brands as when they balance their mix, they drive sales in one way, and they use these smaller brands for margin and for profit. And so what happens is it inhibits the ability to really break through and be successful for these small companies. And so when we talk about driving change, these manufacturers, the farmers and folks who are leaning in and trying to drive change, you got to make sure that everybody along the way is embracing and supporting that and giving a chance, and not penalizing some of these brands and some of these products from success. So there's just a couple. There's a litany of more things that I'm sure we could go into.
And the food crops that we're subsidizing, that we should stop subsidizing or stop subsidizing as much. What do we talk, corn?
Yeah, corn, soy, these types of things. There's some basic things that are in so many of our products.
Yeah. Rachel, what about whey?
What about whey? It's the way to go. Well, I could talk about dairy for sure specifically, but just to build off of what has been said so far, I'm going to take a different approach and say that people don't know what they're eating. Mm-hmm. You are what you eat, but people don't know. So people think they know, and then they're going to fight against anything that's new. And I think that's harmful, because what we're eating and how we're making that food, how we're eating it, all of it, is contributing to this problem. That's then going to make it harder to make our food. The other thing that I find, especially when it comes to cultivated meat, is that culture plays a big role in what people eat. And so if you look at meat, if all of us here were to shout out what you eat at Thanksgiving, I'm sure it's a turkey, and that's part of our culture. That's a lot of turkeys that have to be grown and killed for that meal. So that's just something that people have to think about, is how much, even here, my hometown in Michigan, like, you might not think there's a lot of culture, but there sure is, especially around food. And if people just understood the choices that they made and the effect on climate change, and that there's a connection, that would be huge.
What are people eating that they don't understand, or they don't understand the consequences of?
Oh, snacks.
People don't read their labels. I was going to build on that. I think, when you're in this industry, my point of view is we have a basic covenant with consumers, right? If you're making a food or a beverage, you expect it to be food or beverage. But there's so much that goes into formulation, and a lot of companies use a lot of very artificial things that, we as a country take the approach of it's fun until we prove it's not, versus many other countries are really scrutinize things and ban things. Like artificial colors are not allowed in Europe, but we're perfectly fine within the US, despite the fact that we know it's a known carcinogen. So I feel that we, buyers who put products on their shelves, we as manufacturers, when we make a product, is like it needs to be food. It needs to be stuff that you can find in your pantry that a consumer would make, and we're just making it more convenient for them.
Is that a plus? Food needs to be food, and that generates a plus. I think that there have been efforts to improve food labeling. There's some restrictions there. Do you think that needs to go further? You mentioned artificial colors. What else do we need to know that's in there that we're not paying attention to?
Well, I think there. I was like, are you asking me, or should I let other people talk? For me, I'm more like the artificial ingredients and things like that. The reality is people don't read the back label for the most part. It's probably less than 5% of people really read it. They may look at the nutrition and just look at, it's typically sugar, maybe calories, maybe fat. I don't know. There's various things that people look for, but they don't totally understand it. And I think everything, like I don't think you have to over legislate. Like in the sense of like, if I'm gonna have dessert, I want to have a dessert, right? So there's going to be sugar in there. We all need to have balance in life. But I do think, just even as we formulate stuff, I tend to go much lighter on flavorings, much lighter on sugars, and I try to move those things down. We are actually training people on what they should like. And when you come out of the womb, sugar is something you naturally like, but bitter things, sour things, you have to learn to like, right? And so just even parents, doctors are not trained on how to feed and how to build a healthy eating approach for parents and little ones. So there's just a lot to do just starting at its foundation in the beginning.
Rachel, I want to talk about cultured meat a little bit. Your approach, obviously Impossible came out. Artificial meat had sort of a heyday a couple of years ago. I remember seeing the launch of new products at CES, which I thought was a very strange association. Their stocks have fallen a little bit, their stars fallen a little bit. They're still on the market. Contrast that with what you're working on and sort of the state of artificial. It's not really artificial in your case, but
it's
cultured
not
meat.
artificial. Yeah, so there's a big difference between the plant-based meat alternatives, the Impossible Burgers, no, not trying to advertise for anyone, but that. And then you have the cultivated meat, which really is meat in every sense of the word. The biggest difference is that people sort of accept the fact that the meat alternatives that are based on these proteins aren't going to taste like meat. They understand that. A lot of people understand that. If I was to swap out a slaughtered New York strip for a cultivated New York strip, the idea is no one would know. That you go to the restaurant, you want a juicy steak. You cut into the cultivated meat, they're gonna want a juicy steak. And going back to almost the label thing, I think that if we wanna save the planet and get people to eat better, we as manufacturers just make that decision. Mm-hmm. I don't know if we can trust the consumer to make changes fast enough to really try and save what's on the screen behind us. I don't think that's gonna happen. So part of us in the cultivated meat industry, it's like the beef industry, for example, isn't probably going to allow a big label that says, this cow was killed to give you this hamburger. They're probably not gonna allow that. And so we have to figure out how do we balance it? How do we not fight with the beef industry, but how do we just work with them and try and offset the challenges they have as far as growing? And we're going to try and offset that. But again, the only way that we're really going to make an impact is if people can't tell the difference, and then maybe we don't tell them.
And an example there is the dollars investment goes into helping farmers and whatnot that have livestock, but investing, because the thing is, to make it economically viable for more people, you have to get down this learning curve, and you have to bring the economies of scale such that you can do it in a financially responsible way. And so, that's where government and whatnot can have grants and funds available to help and spur that kind of investment.
And I think to add a little bit more to that, if it's okay. So you also mentioned like maybe we don't tell them, right? Like that it is, plant-based and so on. Like that's what I've been hearing a lot like these last few days. Like how do we make more food or just sustainability much more attractive so that we don't have to be telling people like choose a sustainability option, just choose a better experience, a better, higher quality product, right? I think that's really how we're gonna get to scale a lot of the sustainability solutions.
So how far away are we from having that cultivated juicy steak?
A long ways away. But full disclaimer, I do not make the juicy steak. I make the material that makes the juicy steak,
Right.
if that
You're the
makes
intel
sense.
inside.
I'm the B2B. But I think we're a long ways off, and some of that has to do with regulations, geopolitical issues, all of that. So I don't know. I don't know who's going to be elected in November. I have no idea. So.
And there's a strong lobby, so they will fight against that, just like dairy did against plant-based dairy and stuff like that. There will be heavy litigation to make sure that it doesn't move fast.
Yeah, that's certainly a theme that's come up a bunch of times today, is that look at the entrenched interests that are operating against these goals, and that's what's slowing things down. Is there anything, I mean, one of the other, I mean, I think it's strange to say we shouldn't be, on one hand we're saying people should know what they're eating, and on the other hand we're saying maybe we hide some gory details from them. But just in the United States, just the amount of meat that we consume, it seems to me in and of itself, and I'm a meat eater, I had a burger yesterday, but it's clearly a problem. And it goes back to culture of like, we're just used to having protein at every meal. How does that change?
Well, one of those is you have to consider that as people make more money, as countries become more financially secure, their appetite for meat goes up, and that's huge. We're running into issues where so back to the culture thing, for example, people have eaten so much of a certain type of meat because it's part of their culture that it's now endangered or going extinct. And so one thing that we have to think about is, do we make that shift, or do we have to make something so that people sort of keep up? I don't know if I'm answering your question. Kind of forgot about it, but.
No, it's okay, you're close.
Okay. All right.
So before we go, maybe if there was one policy change or consumer behavior that you could just automatically fix and alter, what to make this better, what would it be? We can start with anybody, whoever's got an
Pass it
answer
up to
first.
Vivian.
I mean, I think one of the things that is very challenging is we don't make it easy for consumers to understand what's going on. If you just think of like how we deal with garbage, like it's different by municipality. If you think about all the different icons and certifications and whatnot you can do, there's a whole litany of them, and it further confuses consumers. And so as much as we can simplify things and make it much more clear and straightforward, the better.
And I think to add a little bit to that, like there's a really large education gap at this moment of like how do we go to like sustainability. You mentioned it's very confusing, and that's true. Like there's so many different types of packaging. You hear biodegradable, compostable, recyclable. Like what does that even mean? What's actually better for the environment, and like what goes where, right? And that's why we really want to focus on like how do we make it simpler as possible, and really that's why we focus a lot on reusing our space, because that's ultimately the best solution. So.
Yeah, I mean, it just sound bites. I mean, just plastic is demonized, and it for very good reason in a lot of ways. But technically speaking, a recyclable PET bottle from a carbon standpoint is better than aluminum and glass and other things. However, it has a waste issue because it is not recycled at the same level, right? And then there are microplastic. There are other issues, but like it gets really complicated when you go into it. And so I've been on business where I'm like, oh, I want to convert to this. And then as you speak to specialists and understand our waste streams, like you recognize that when you think you're going to do a good thing, it actually doesn't get done that way because consumers don't know, and it's put in the wrong bin, and then it pollutes the recycling stream. And so it's you need more things to be more legislated and standardized at the national level on some of these things.
Yeah. Unfortunately, with Chevron, we just went the other way. Rachel, you want to chime in? Last word?
Yeah, I think people need to be given the information to make better choices. I do think there's people who want to make that choice. I didn't know 5 years ago that the global agricultural and food industry gives off more greenhouse gas emissions than all transportation combined. I didn't know that. And so I feel like those people, that sounds bad. The people who buy the electric vehicles and feel like they are making a big difference, if we were to inform them that if you cut out meat, you would actually be having a bigger impact on the environment, I think more people would make that choice. But food is, people don't know about food. They don't know the impact of the food they buy, how it's made, et cetera.
50% gets wasted.
Yeah, that too.
Throughout, like, starting in the farm all the way through, 50% gets wasted. And so, you can see a range of studies, but, a massive portion of greenhouse gas comes from food and beverage, because we all have to eat. And so just getting better, both as consumers, as manufacturers, as developers, as retailers, all of us own a part of that.
Yeah. And I think it's the double-edged sword too, where we don't understand the systems and the consequences. At the same time, we feel very strongly about our culture, about our history, and about that turkey on Thanksgiving. And it's like, it's a dangerous combination.
And I think, just in summary, like we in the industry, we have a responsibility to do the best we can and make the right choices and invest in the future, right? I've worked in big company, they may get bashed a bit, but like they are working from the inside. And for them, when I was on those businesses, how can you take something that you're reaching 30% of all households every single year and make it incrementally better, right? And now in a small business, how can I take something that's inherently better and really scale it to get to more households? So I think people are trying to attack it from different angles.
Excellent. Well, we're going to keep this conversation going during the happy hour, maybe even during the town hall. But thank you so much for coming and sharing your insights.